Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Drew Pearson. You are listening to the Pearson Perspective. This is a deep dive into the stories and mindsets of successful business operators and investors. Let's go have some fun.
What was it, Drew, that, you've got a background in real estate that spans a lot of different things. What took you to storage?
That's a great question. I think going back to that story of owning real estate was always the key. That's where I wanted to be. I spent 10 years in brokerage, had some mild success there. But I remember a couple of deals of, the buyer changed his mind, and that check that I, was going to use to buy my wife something just evaporated. And the lack of control drove me bonkers. Like I need to be the guy making the decisions.
Right.
That, and I've just been fortunate enough to know a handful of men who are in their mid-50s, and they play a fair amount of golf or tennis or travel, and it's not a bad lifestyle.
Yeah.
And so that's what always kind of drove me to the ownership side. And just to be honest, we tried some other strategies, industrial, medical office, and there wasn't any real scalability.
Mm-hmm.
The demand is just very high for those assets.
Yeah.
And so, in COVID, things got real. It was a come to Jesus moment for me. And I was like, is this going to be a hobby or is this going to be a real scalable business? And so I burned the boats, built my own proprietary database, cold called, built relationships, took a large amount of risk buying these assets without a whole lot of experience.
Yeah.
And so that's how we got here. And I've kind of done it all, from sweeping out units, cutting locks, training managers, doing the call center, building a call center, closing a call center, buying, selling. I'm not an expert in any one thing, but there's not much I haven't done in storage.
Yeah, I remember. I think when we first spoke, I called you because you had just joined the Louisiana Self Storage Association, and I got your number from there. And then you had just gotten into it. I think you might have had a property or two, and And every time we spoke for the next 2 years, you were on the road to cut a lock or sweep out a unit.
That's it.
Really.
I'm the only guy with a Lexus SUV that's a work truck.
Yeah.
I had my grinder and lock cutters and all that in there.
Yeah. Well, I think that's something that has kept me in storage, and I'm blessed that I probably would have been chewed up and spit out of real estate had I not walked into storage. I just want people listening to this to know how much of a kind, welcoming industry is. It's just a warm industry. People are willing to share.
Yep.
But everybody here probably comes from a humble beginning at some point where they had to get into it, like you got into it, or like I got into it, or so many other people I know. One of my mentors in the industry, he recently passed away in April, but he started building facilities in 2005 with a partner, and they didn't take any money out of him for 12 years.
Wow.
But then by the time, his projects had matured, those guys had an amazing success story.
Mm-hmm.
And Greg was able to leave something, a family legacy to his family. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Came from a very humble background, owned an auction business, and decided that he was going to buy a mountainside and buy a creek bed and level out the two and build something out of nothing.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are just so many great stories in the business. But thanks for asking that.
Yeah. Yeah. I know you mentioned something about, or we talked about the managers and onboarding. I know we talked offline about culture. Is that something you want to get more into?
Yeah, man. And that's something that is always on my mind. I've never really worked. I've worked for one W-2 job in high school. I got fired from it. So I don't have a lot of experience. Sure. I used to think culture was like Margarita Fridays.
Yeah.
And that's certainly not it. Maybe after hours drinks occasionally can build upon culture, but that's not what culture is. How do you think about culture, or what are some things that you would recommend that I kind of implement as we have kind of an in-person kind of at the home office, but then kind of a remote culture with store managers at different stores remotely?
Well, I want to back up too, because you gave a little bit of color on your experience with W-2, not a W-2. I've mostly had a W-2, but it's been in a startup or an entrepreneurial type setup. So like even on the donut truck, I was W-2, but I was the only guy in town, literally running the business. Everybody else lived somewhere else. And then, started at Highland when we had 4 folks there. So, and to an extent, sometimes there's been no culture because there's nothing. I mean, there's nobody else, right?
Right.
But then I've also seen culture evolve. And then in the short time that I worked for a tech company, I did see the Margarita Fridays and stuff that people think is culture, but it's not. I came from the food truck. I was burnt out on everything. I was exhausted. I was working 16-hour days with no help, for no money. And so I thought, oh, these tech jobs, they'll pamper you. They'll give you the Margarita Fridays. They have a keg in the office. That's cool. It was so annoying and obnoxious because they give you that, and then all the other benefits and pay get thrown aside just because they're doing that. So, I don't think that it is paying, even money's not everything. You want to treat people correctly and that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, I think culture really comes down to showing that you care. I mean, it's knowing what's going on in everybody's life and talking about it. There was a clip. I thought about, bringing this up, and I'm going to go ahead and do it, but not to bring anything political into this at all. But there's a clip of Sotomayor talking about how she could be such good friends with Clarence Thomas, and they're polar opposites. And she describes his ability to walk through DC and know every janitor's name, every clerk's name, every tour guide's name, their grandchildren's, who's going to college, how old they are, who had a kid, that sort of thing. And it's just that approach to people, I think, that is the number one thing with culture. Everything else is downstream from there. Of course, you do need to pay people correctly in that market. But that's a form of showing that you care, right?
Absolutely.
And from there, I think it's a cliche, but actually acting on the fact that you wouldn't ask somebody to do something you wouldn't do yourself. When I say actually acting on it, you hire somebody that's a junior analyst and you expect them to do a lot of grunt work. But when maybe they're on vacation or they've had a rough 6-week run because you've got 20 closings, you do one of the grunt tasks without even asking them or expecting them to do it, just because maybe they need a little bit of a breather or they need a little bit of a break. Maybe you go drive to Mississippi and sweep out a unit because your manager's on vacation and you don't let the work pile up while they're gone. Those are things that can really go a long way. When I worked at the YMCA camp, we had a great culture. And I think a fundamental piece of that was that our director, who'd been there for 30 years, got up before everybody else and went to bed after everybody else, and actually put his money where his mouth was and would do that. He called himself the head dishwasher, and he really was. If there was one thing that didn't get done because we ran out of time and everybody needed to go have fun or go take care of a different task, he would make sure that he got done. So I think just doing the things that, making sure you would do things that, other people are tasked with, but it takes a little bit of a load off every now and then.
Yeah. That's a great story. It really is just such a challenge. I mean, this is what takes company. I have a friend who said, small businesses stay small for a reason. And the number one reason is not because they don't understand how to sell a product or a widget at a profit. It's the people. Right. It's crossing the chasm with processes, but then you also need people who can and want to do those things at a high enough level. And so it's just something that's always on my mind to try to grow in a sustainable way.
Well, I mean, do you mean that the small businesses struggle to hire the right people, or they know that that maybe they have the right people and they want to keep it at that level? Are they protecting something, or is it something that they can't accomplish?
Yeah. So again, this is my experience and understanding. To get something off the ground, you're a bit of a control person. Right. You try to, shape reality to what you want. But then you realize to go to the next level, you have to let go.
Delegation, yeah.
It's delegation, and it's understanding, listen, this may not be done 100% the way I would do it, but it's 90% to get it done. Conversely, the other hard part is I'm actually weak in this area, and admitting, bringing someone who's stronger on the team and submitting my ego to say, listen, you have more experience, you're better, I trust you. Right. You go take the ball and run. Yeah. And that's just as hard.
Well, I would reference a couple. I mean, I love music. We come down here for Jazz Fest. I would reference, if people go to YouTube, there's a video of Dave Matthews Band playing with the Preservation Hall Jazz Band for the first Saints game after Katrina, and they're playing down at Jackson Square, and they're playing "Burning Down the House" by the Talking Heads. Everybody's jamming, and it's a tight song played by Dave Matthews Band. And then all of a sudden, you have street performers and the Preservation Hall Jazz Band come out on stage and start jamming for like 16 minutes, and it ends up being greater than whatever Dave Matthews and his band was playing. And I use that allegory to say that you can't be afraid to be the least talented musician in the room, but you got to take care of those people. I think that that's a big part of taking that next step. Knowing that maybe you are the most talented because you brought everybody into the same room and you had that foresight to do so, but you may not be the best macroeconomic forecaster, or you may not be the best systems and processes person, or the most organized.
Absolutely.
We got to think about where the strong suits are for business owners. It's a visionary role. There's people that are better at organization and forecasting, that sort of thing.
I mean, it comes down to like know thyself. It's so important and so fundamental. As you grow, you to your point, delegating, offloading those tasks, and then building that team.
No, you're 100% right there. It's as far as growth goes, I would say that hiring the right people to let go of the things, even if you're good at them too, is a big thing. I would say, where we are, we've experienced some growth, some even more exponential growth in the last 6 months, because we did get some people into the right places where even our, founders and co-founders, they had some expertise in development, but we brought in a guy in development who's a rock star. And it's not that our founders and co-founders are uninvolved in the development, but having that much more freedom has allowed us to focus on bringing in 2 more verticals that are going to really scale the company. I mean, that's just an example right there.
And it just goes back to the people again. I had a good conversation with my buddy Chris, and he said, listen, we lost 1.5 million in the red one year, and it's because they were hiring those right people. They were ramping up for that growth, and he's gone on to build.
Well, that's what I was talking about at the beginning.
Absolutely.
Right? If you're gonna bring in that right kind of capital, make sure that the systems are in place and the people are in place. You may go 150 or 1.5 million dollars in the red. I mean, it may be a necessity for a year, but I think that the success will follow that. I really do. I mean, you talk about, you specifically talk about people being the fuel for the race car, right? I mean, that's really what it is. I mean, we all don't want to go to the pump right now. It's going to be really expensive,
that's
but
right.
It'll probably get us up the road a little bit.
Yeah, man. And just understanding, and that's one of the things I struggle with too, is what type of company are you trying to build? Right. Where are you trying to go? We all want, clarity and certainty, and knowing that's impossible, but putting yourself in a position to win, right, and to be flexible enough to capitalize on the next opportunity.
Well, are there specific areas that, let's say I would ask you, do you have a specific strength that you are having trouble letting go of hiring someone to fill that strength? And do you have a particular weakness that you're like, I need to hire to fill this? I think they're both very important, equally important.
Absolutely.
To hire somebody that's going to replace you, thinking that maybe you're the best fit for this role, or that's your favorite thing to do. You need to be able to give that up. Like I said, one of our co-founders being very involved with development, hiring a rock star guy in development, freed him up to work on some other things. He's still involved, but we have a rock star taking care of that.
Right. Well, I think my biggest weakness, which was a relationship that you actually introduced me to, and I'm thankful for, is on the store management side. And so we've kind of brought in a partner there, and he's got great experience and really helping shore that up for me so that I can focus on what I'm best at, which is the deal structure side, prospecting, lenders, telling our story in an effective way. And so that's just been such a blessing. So thank you for that.
Yeah. And how about, you said what you're good at. I mean, you think you'll get to the point where you hire somebody to work more on what you think you're good at, so that you can, scale the capital side of things or the debt side of things?
Yeah. Potentially, I've got a really great buddy, who's a mortgage banker, and so he can really solve our lending challenges
Yeah.
there. And so he's kind of paid as a fee when a deal closes. So he's
Nice.
not an in-house employee.
That's very
A
important.
guy who I have a high level of trust in. He's great. The prospecting part, I don't want to give up, really. I really enjoy that part.
That's something that's near and dear to my heart too.
Yeah, and it's hard to find. You're really good at it. There's not a lot of Gilberts running around who love to make cold calls, and so I don't foresee giving that up anytime soon.
Well, I think you got to be a little bit of a strange person to really like it.
No
I mean,
doubt.
it also comes with a weird love of staring at maps and geography.
Yeah,
You're staring into some swamp somewhere, and you're like, "Hey, there's a storage facility." Or every time I get in a plane, I'm looking out the window,
Me too.
and I'm looking for homes coming out of the ground. I'm looking for a new Walmart, a new Publix.
Mm-hmm.
And then I immediately try to find that on my phone, drop a pin, and come back to it.
Mm-hmm. You're a psycho, man.
It's weird. It's weird, but you got to find somebody who likes to do that, because I think that I'm not trying to pump myself up, but I think having that kind of approach to it, because I know you do too, it yields quality deals, right? Quality over quantity. There are large national brokerage shops that we both know who will go out there and bang out 500 calls a week, but if you're the buyer doing that, that's not going to bring you a lot of good stuff.
Right.
I think, being really intentional and that comes with the relationship side of stuff, like I talked about a little bit with cold calling, but also that initial market research. It's a hard thing to give up. It's a hard thing to find somebody who wants to do that.
Yeah.
It's a weird role.
It is. And that's where the value's created. And again, you talked about quality deals, and that's what's so important to me. I mean, I almost have this like moral imperative to myself to keep myself accountable to keeping our investment principles, being disciplined, not getting over our skis, and kind of caught up in the fever and the froth of the market. And that's important to me. I'll stay smaller.
Yeah.
The size doesn't matter to me. What I really want is an efficient, clean business where our customers, our employees are all onboarded correctly, our employees feel a part of the team. We're profitable. Profit's important. We're profitable. But the size doesn't really matter. And if we get our processes right and our people right, kind of on our conversation, other of friends and mentors, the size will take care of itself.
Yeah.
And it'll usually get a lot bigger than you ever imagined.
Right. I think, it's like moving into a new house. You gotta move in and make sure everything's put away correctly. You can't just throw a bunch of junk in the back of the closet, or it'll never get straightened up.
Yeah.
So you can't skip over, making sure everybody's feels taken care of, or you hiring the right people, because that'll be a broken part of your system. So I think, I've watched you be very incredibly intentional, incredibly principled, and scale it in an appropriate manner, and not scale for the sake of scaling, but scale when it makes sense to after you've done the right thing. It's very hard to know too, the first time you've ever done something.
Right.
Let's not kid ourselves where it's the first time we've all done any of this.
Yeah.
To not get ahead of yourself, to not say, well, it's about time I hired this person, or I do this, so I'm going to start doing it. But I missed a step, or I made a mistake and I tried to cover it up, but it's still there. I think that's hard.
No, you're right. And thank you for your kind words.
Yeah. I know you wanted to talk about investment decision making. I know we talked about the capital side of things. Is there anything you want to talk about particularly there?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think with investments, it's almost important to start with deal breakers.
Yeah.
What things do we automatically go into the no pile to save our brain power and our time? Do you have any no's that you can share, non-starters, and then how do you guys think about getting to yes?
Well, I think there's a couple things that just come with experience, right? So one thing, they kind of go hand in hand, and I hope people, I'll try to explain it slow, can wrap their head around what I'm saying here. What fits your capital. And so there's a lot of no's because it just doesn't fit, whether it's too much risk or it's just off the bat going to be too much of a compressed return. So those are going to be no's right away. We're kind of right down the middle in terms of value add. We're not way out on the risk spectrum. We'll take a little bit, We do a lot of construction and heavier value add, but we're not going to go buy a stabilized asset in the middle of Atlanta.
Yep.
So, knowing that, and then just knowing what a reasonable basis is for your capital, depending on the geography. Some people can go buy $390 a foot Class A deal in Atlanta, and that's what works for them. To me, I know that we can go build down the street, but it may take a lot more work and a lot more brain damage, and it may take 18 more months to find the site to go build it for half the price or less.
Right.
And then knowing that that's a sliding scale that goes all the way out to Goodlettsville, Tennessee, or somewhere outside of Asheville. And then knowing that Asheville and Florida have some of the same metrics at play, where you don't have a lot of buildable land, and you don't have it, and you have a lot of demand, not a lot of new product. And so, like I said, it's experience, but it's really controlling your basis, I think, is what shifts things into an automatic no.
Right.
And then, in an interest rate time like we're in now, the days of a 4 3/4 cap are gone.
Absolutely.
And when that's the first word out of somebody's mouth, or a price that comes back to that metric, it's like, oh yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is for us.
Yep.
So.
Yep. And that's what I love about the game is there are so many of these metrics that come down to experience, a little bit of gut feel. Got to know replacement cost. Got to know your cost of capital, interest rate, your lease up time.
Yeah.
Can we build this for potentially cheaper than our competitor? Barriers to entry.
Yep.
Growth. Maybe the market's flat. Maybe it's even declining. That doesn't mean we won't buy there. That just means we will pay a different price.
Exactly.
And then so then we get to the point where, at the end of the day, I think Warren Buffett said, price is my due diligence.
Right.
And so there's a price that's too high to pay for downtown Atlanta. And conversely, there's almost no price that's too low that will buy almost anything.
Right.
So it really depends on the price and how we can kind of get there.
And I would just encourage people who are out there trying to scale something to really just try to do the research on their markets. Whatever asset class you're in, if you can find rate data. I don't have any experience in industrial, so I don't know that you can go out there and, what's everybody getting in, like North Baton Rouge for industrial rates? I have no idea, but I know what they're getting for storage rates, and I know that the growth is good, or the growth is good in Prairieville. And,
right.
A deal comes across in those areas and it's roughly in the basis range that I like, or maybe it's even a little lower. So it may be a screamer. And I know where the rates are in my head, then you jump on it. We bought a deal in Crestview, Florida. Rates are solid there. We've been circling around that market for a while, tried to buy a couple opportunities off market. A deal came to us at $50 a foot. And,
Whoa.
And we know that there's a lot of work there. So you got to have the capital that's willing to put in, a ton of CapEx, and patient enough to see us get to that realized rate of return. But there's a market for everybody. There's a price for everybody, right? You just got to really do the research. You have to know that Crestview, Florida exists.
Yeah.
And markets like it, and
absolutely,
know that you're where you're looking.
Yeah.
I would say that an easy thing that filters deals for us is just that research up front. Some, like you said, you can name a market in Arkansas, and we'll have a feel for what the rates are like there, what the income's like there. That's the big things that we're gonna jump all over is growth rate, income, rental rates. Like I said, with access and visibility, you got to have one of these things. So you have one of those three, and then there's a story there. Then there's a price that makes sense.
Okay. And so you guys kind of have some minimum, I need X amount of people in a 3-mile trade, or I need X amount, look, we're not going to go into a market where it's $25,000 for the average household income,
That would be a tough sell. Now,
Yeah.
we are in some markets that are, $30,000 to $50,000 median household income. But there's a story there, whether it's a good basis or a mismanaged property that's got a lot of upside, or it's close to something that we own. Now, that's another thing too that shifts things into like let's take a second look, or let's really look into this. Is what does this asset, now that we have scale in our portfolio, do for either the management side of things, or what does it do for the portfolio complexion? And we've bought stuff that range from C to A assets, but knowing where are we today and where do we want to go. We're lucky that our partners are long-term holders, and I don't see an exit in the future, but you want to think about that. If we did exit, who are we exiting to? What does that look like?
Right.
Portfolio complexion. So is it time to go buy some nicer stuff, or have we bought a couple nicer things and let's go back and get some more return? And you just kind of weave that together,
Right.
but you need guys, like I said, when you're building a team, that have that macro vision, and then can learn and then apply that on the next level down and all the way down to your analyst.
Yeah. And that's such a good point. It's probably, blending in some of those higher quality assets with lower returns is probably a smart idea if you're moving towards a potential portfolio sale.
Yeah.
It can kind of, rising tide lifts all boats.
Right.
And that certainly feels that way.
Certainly seen that, and then you just hypothetically, you can buy a facility for $50 a foot, but you bought a Class A facility for $200 a foot, but it was actually worth that pound per pound in the same market. You put a little juice on the Class A facility, $200 a foot. You completely revamp the $50 a foot. You come for a refi, you refi them both. You're refining your $50 a foot facility over $100 a foot, right?
Yeah, all day.
So that's where buying that Class A asset kind of brings in your returns a little lower there, but it lifts up that other asset quite a bit.
Paint all the doors red, and look, this thing's $110 a foot.
Exactly.
Yeah. So there's a little more strategy going on there.
Unfortunately, it's just one of those things where it's more of an art than a science.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I can't say that you plug it into a spread. Like the best deals are deals you don't need a spreadsheet for.
Yep.
Of course, we have a spreadsheet for everything, but
that's right. That's right.
You need to be able to look at it. And again, I really can't harp on just that market research enough to just know what are the rates in this pocket, what are the high income areas of this market, that market,
mm-hmm.
and are there any holes?
Yeah, man, that's so helpful, and it usually just gets back to good old fashioned hard work.
Yeah,
experience, time, hard work, making a mistake or two, hitting some out of the park, and figuring out, well, how can we replicate that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's really cool. Man, we covered a bunch of really good topics today. What else did we not cover?
Well, let's see. We talked a good bit about culture, and decision making. We talked about our backgrounds. I want to talk about something that I heard the other day about your time in Jackson Hole. What'd you get into out there?
Man, that was a great time of my life. My parents were always kind enough to take us on family vacations.
Yeah.
And we never went to Disney World or Disneyland. We always went out west and went hiking. And so at 13, I went out to Jackson Hole and just fell in love with the place. And so I was my junior, senior summer in college, went out to Jackson Hole, called a ranch, said, "Hey, I'm Drew from the Bayou. I want to go to work." And so they said, "We need a bartender." I said, "Well, I can drink. I'm your guy." And so they hired me. So I was a bartender by night and did a little guided some fly fishing trips on the little Hoback River there. And man, just had the time of my life. I mean, we were out there for 3 or 4 months and had some other buddies who were up and around the Jackson Hole area who I'd see occasionally. But it's a really fond memory of my life of just, long out west summers, some beautiful mountains, and had a good time.
Yeah, that's great. Do you see yourself trying to find some real estate deals out there?
It's certainly not Jackson Hole. That's like a billionaire's playground at this point. I think Idaho's probably got some opportunities over there. But I don't know. I've got 4 young kids, and I'm not sure that like buying a second home or anything makes sense.
Yeah.
But we're certainly going to be spending some time out west as a family, hiking and fishing and riding horses and, having a good time.
I certainly understand. I think that, in time you can gear the real estate portfolio out that way.
Yes.
You might need a Sun Valley office.
There you go. Yeah.
And I've seen some guys do that. And it turns into 9 months out of the year all of a sudden. Yeah. You do the majority of your work out there for good reason too.
Yeah, we're in a pretty good business.
Yeah,
and without Wi-Fi, you can get a lot of things accomplished.
Yeah. Where do you? I know we talked about a little bit of where we see opportunity in terms of deal size, is there another asset class in real estate that you see a lot of opportunity in, or as a horizon, maybe the next self-storage in terms of just consolidating it?
That's a really interesting question. We own some industrial. I love industrial. Multi-tenant shares a lot of properties with self-storage. The lease terms are a little bit longer, but you're limited CapEx. We're looking at some industrial in Mississippi where we own some other storage assets, which makes sense. So I like kind of stable asset class, which is industrial, flex industrial, with maybe off the radar markets, being in your bottom 100 MSAs as opposed to your top 10. These assets are trading for, a 7.5, 8 cap, $80 a foot, and it would cost you $150 a foot to build today. And the rents would be 60% higher. So even in a market that's flat, you got to feel good about, hey, we're 95% occupied. You can't build this stuff. There's nowhere to go, but rents have got to go up.
Yeah. How much does, in a market like that with that product type, the jobs that are available in those markets, they're really tied to that product type. Does that play into what you're looking for? Like, an electrician's always going to be in demand in that type of market, a plumber or something adjacent to that, the guy that's supplying the parts, that sort of thing.
Right. Yeah. I think job growth is really important. You're not going to see eye-popping numbers in these bottom 100 metros, which is why you're getting a good deal on the going in basis. I just have this feeling in my gut that, look, these places aren't folding up and going away.
Right.
And you look at a flat growth, or you look at a negative 1% population growth for 5 years, and it's like, oh gosh, but there's 300,000 people in the metro.
Right.
Okay, Shreveport, Louisiana hasn't had positive growth since I've been born.
Yeah.
Shreveport ain't going away in 10 years.
No,
or
it's
in
not.
20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And they've got problems, but the people still need to be served. And so when you think of it from an kind of like a business, like we're here to serve our customer's an employee, or our customer's a company, there's certainly a wrong side of the tracks you can be on.
Right.
But if we can just get it mostly right, a B location, a B product at a good basis, we understand the roofs are going to fail, the HVACs are going to fail, the parking lot's going to be resurfaced every 15 years. We can budget for those CapEx items. You can put together a nice little portfolio.
Yeah. And there's probably a taker to lease it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we're not pro forma 95%. It's like, hey, we're buying it at 80% occupied. I think we can raise it up to 88% in 24 months. And it helps to have the story. Look, owner's from out of town, inherited the property, does his own leasing, and in order to cut costs, he's not using the big broker in town. And so there's something we can kind of grab a hold of here and say,
right,
we can add some better processes, property management, and maybe make it a little.
What size? I know that obviously industrial's got a massive range, right? You
right.
have a 6,000 square foot building or a 1,000,000 square foot building. What size are those properties typically?
Flex properties can be anywhere, but from 15,000 to 150,000. We're looking at a few that are in that 50, 75.
Okay.
1,000 square foot range. The problem with the product type in the Southeast is there's more flex industrial product in DFW Metro than Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama combined. And so it's not a real scalable strategy for us. It's kind of an opportunistic strategy.
Right.
Unless you want to spend a lot of time in the car or the plane. And I don't. I've got a young family. I want to be home for dinner every night. So it's something we have an eye for, but we're not really building a whole business around,
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like a good opportunity, but I agree. To really scale something like that, you're talking 100 days plus on the road.
Yeah.
It's exhausting.
Another thing that's really interesting, and we talked about this before the show started, was just this Airbnb model.
Yep.
If I was starting at zero today, that's where I'd be putting my attention.
Yep.
Now there's more heavy lifting on the operational side, the cleaning side, but you can figure that in 18 months, anybody with a brain and with focus can solve that problem. The returns are there to attract some outside investors, and and it's just really a micro opportunity.
Two things I want to talk about there. One would be, what do you think about the debt and the finance situation there? Would you look at a lower basis, not a lower basis relative to the like a price per foot, but under a certain dollar size, would you go no debt just to de-risk it?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I'm not a no debt guy. I do think that, my biggest concern with Airbnb is we're tying our prices to the house next door, and you have different people playing different games.
Right.
Let's just, for instance, in Florida, I could be buying it for an Airbnb. The guy next to me is buying it for a second home for his grandkids to come down. He doesn't care what he pays for it.
Right.
And so as an investor, I have to stay principled.
Mm-hmm.
And we just have to make sure we're not overpaying for it.
Right.
But man, if we're getting into the 30 to 50% 30 to 50% equity in real estate, you can really withstand some hiccups there.
Yeah.
50% down is, I feel pretty good about it. If you're using any sort of discipline metric there,
yeah,
I'm not overly worried about it.
So then going into the other side of that equation would be, we're in a recession.
Mm-hmm.
You and I agree on the definition of that. We would say you're going to see a peel back on like recreation. People are not going to be renting these.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And so that's my biggest concern.
Yeah.
But it's also very strange. I mean, it would take like a recession, I think, for people in my town to stop going to Florida to vacation.
Right.
They may not stay at Seaside, but they're still going to Gulf Shores or Orange Beach. Like they just may knock down their house expenditures a little bit.
Right.
So to me, finding that kind of Class B and again, this is just my personal. Everybody's different.
Sure. You don't need to be beachfront.
Yeah, maybe it's beachfront or it's not the sexiest beach locale to give you some of that resistance. You can kind of hedge your bets. People are still going to go to Florida and go vacation. They may take a year off, but they're going the next year. Like people love some Florida down here. I imagine it's the same way with ski rentals or vacation on the lake in North Georgia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would hope that maybe ski prices will come down a little bit.
Yeah, me too. I would love that.
But we were looking at the prices the other day. It's out of control. But that makes a lot of sense to me. And I guess it's looking at but how would we take this example? So we're coming off of a wild spin, right? An average rate in the area for an Airbnb for a night's $129. Do you think that somebody rents it at $88 a night in a recession?
That sounds pretty good to me.
You just keep the same occupancy, but you go to 88.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or maybe you drop down 10% occupancy and your rates drop. But again, if you're putting 35% down, I'm guessing you can still break even.
Yeah.
With 50% occupancy and a rate drop.
Right.
Because you're not buying these at a 7-cap deal.
Right.
Oftentimes these Airbnbs are kind of mid-double digit cash flows. Sometimes they're getting even higher than that after 24 months.
You're going to be able to pay your note.
Yeah.
And another thing, I guess, too, the bright side, if you want to call it that, of a recession, the pull back on the use of the property, you probably see a lot less CapEx, right?
Absolutely.
So
and if you can tell the story right and not over leverage, hopefully you can double down and get some more value in that market.
Yeah.
Buy some more houses or what have you.
Sure. Yeah. Have you thought about modular homes, like a modular cabin of sorts? You see a lot of cabins that's a prefab kit. Mm-hmm. Is that a way to control a basis for the Airbnb stuff? Have you looked into that?
I have not looked into that. Potentially it could. Absolutely. I mean, it sounds like a great idea, especially for families getting together or just having a little bit of green space.
Yeah, I think about speed to start renting, right?
Absolutely.
I see mountain lots all the time that are 10 to 80 grand, but everybody in the area is tight on labor still.
Oh yeah.
Even though we're in a recession, they'll be tight for 18 months on the labor side of things. So you can get a prefab kit, get that house erected in 3 months. Mm-hmm. Your basis is probably 30% lower, and you're renting right away.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I mean, I can only speak personally. If we go somewhere, you're kind of looking for a nice couch, a decent oven, a nice little lighting package.
Yeah.
And I'm not going out west or to North Georgia for the interior finishes. I'm going to go hike and fish, grill a steak outside, and have a cold beer.
Yeah.
So to me, that you could probably charge a little bit of a discount.
Yeah.
To the mountain cabin, but your costs are 50% below that, and you're rolling.
I just want to be left alone and maybe a hot tub.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want to hear the highway.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear my neighbors.
Yeah.
Probably don't want to see them if I don't have to.
Yep.
And that's pretty much it.
And so the only thing I would just encourage you or any of the listeners is there's so much of a difference between owning one or two of these and owning 20.
Right.
Especially if they're spaced out, and just thinking through how we're going to manage this, who's going to visit, how are they compensated, how am I going to be compensated, because it's real time and brain power, and if you're not careful, you'll be stuck in the weeds managing these little things, and it's like, well, this wasn't worth it.
Yeah. I can see that. I've heard that too.
Mm-hmm.
I've met older couples who got into the weeds on them, and then they can't get out.
Yeah. But there's a lot of people doing it. I think you asked about consolidation. I think we're going to see a huge compression in Airbnb, cap rates, portfolio sales, people really getting comfortable, like almost like a hotel would trade, and maybe even lower than that, because it's a residential asset that you can still kind of grab hold of some value there, and as opposed to a hotel, it's single purpose, you know.
Well, there's I've heard of some operating companies, people are big institutions are kicking the tires on to purchase.
Oh yeah,
that are operating these platforms. I think I can't think of there's an example of one. I can't think of it off the top of my head. They do stuff in Southwest North Carolina and North Georgia, and that's all they do. And they probably have over 300, 400 homes under management.
Wow.
And they don't own all the homes, but they manage all the homes. They probably own a portion of them.
Yeah.
But you have, the big asset managers out there looking to buy those guys.
Oh yeah.
And I think there's going to be a push there. Whether it's now, then that might have cooled off. It could be on the other side of this bumps and bruises we're going to have. But I think we'll see things start to restart and people get ahead of this, when they start the clock over again.
Yeah. I mean, there's too many returns in the Airbnb world right now not to attract some attention.
Yeah.
Well,
outside of real estate, I know we've talked about different businesses. Are there business models that are interesting to you? Especially, let's take the fundamentals of storage. Storage is recession resistant.
Mm-hmm.
Are there other businesses that you think are maybe recession resistant that would be an interesting thing to start looking at? Yeah,
that's a great question. And I know we have talked about some operating companies, and some days I think it's wonderful. And then some days I'm like, Drew, it's not, what you got going is not bad. Don't rock the boat.
Sure.
But I do believe that our country needs good leaders. Companies need good leaders. People need good leaders. And if you're one of those people, it's incumbent upon you to use some of those talents to help lead and steward people.
Yeah.
I don't care who you are. Everyone agrees that we have a shortage of great leaders in this country. Yeah. But when we think about businesses, I always go back to the no pile. I'm not interested in oil and gas because of the recession ups and downs nature of the business. It's on a great ride right now, but I want no part of that. I'm not interested in a lot of manufacturing due to the capital intensityness of the business, reinvesting in machinery and parts.
Yeah.
I'm not interested in a lot of equipment sales type businesses. Those returns look really great, but you just have this depreciating asset that you're constantly replacing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, when I think about it, I'm thinking about business out of the spotlight. Oftentimes people don't even know that this service exists. It services maybe some niche type customers in a regional or national basis. There's some barriers to entry, whether that's purchase price, maybe that's a distributorship type license.
Yeah.
Where if people want the product, they have to come through you. I like that.
Yeah.
You're the only guy. And then I think finally having a team or semblance of team in place. You see young business buyers, they'll buy something from a guy who is a salesman type person. He goes away, those relationships go away. You obviously don't want to be in that position. So just understanding where the processes are with the company, the flow of how the customer buys and how that transaction is processed through the company. Can you add value there?
Yeah.
Is there a foundation in place? And oftentimes, if a company's been around for 15 years, there is a moat. They are doing something right. This is not a startup. They're really doing something. And then finally, just having that pricing discipline. We're not going to go pay an 8 multiple for any company.
Right.
We want to be in that kind of 3, 4, 5 range, depending on what it is.
Yeah.
But that's like getting line, Drew. I mean, every private equity business shop is looking for that same thing.
Right.
So what we're talking about is nothing like out of the ordinary here, but it goes back to relationships.
Yeah. Well, I'll go off the wall here just a little bit on something that I've always thought would be interesting. And, breweries are a dime a dozen.
Mm-hmm.
People love that stuff. It's great. And I think I've seen a lot of friends or friends of friends have some success there. One thing I think that is interesting is tacking on a couple of different things to that. So whether you tack on a little bit of a food menu
mm-hmm.
and a music venue or an entertainment
venue.
venue.
Love it.
That's what I like. Where I've seen people struggle with those is when they don't own the real estate. And I've seen some chains pop up in the Southeast or in the Mountain West region where they combine all 3 of those aspects and they're building these things everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I've always wanted to own one of those things. I think that, again, it's another one of those control your bases thing, right? So you can always kind of keep it around. But I'd love to own, a shed in the back of, maybe an old industrial park that's not really industrial anymore, that's got a gravel parking lot, an outdoor space for a band, a little window to throw some barbecue out the door, and maybe we make a beer or 2 there, and just kind of have that cult following.
Yeah.
Everybody shows up on Wednesday night. Everybody shows up on Saturday night.
That sounds great. I mean, sign me up, man.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia. I mean, it's just good, clean living.
Yeah.
We actually have I think it's more of a tap room, burgers, cornhole out back, opening up in Covington here in a month or 2, which everybody's really excited. They're going to do awesome. It's a great location. They're not brewing beer, to my understanding. They're just serving some great local beers. And
maybe that's how you start out, right?
Yeah.
But there, going to school in Knoxville, there's multiple places that they don't brand themselves as a brewery. They don't try to distribute their beer, but they got 3 or 4 that they make. Or Park Tavern's a place in Atlanta that they don't sell their beer outside of the facility, but their beer's better than any of the breweries within a 3 mile.
Man, that's awesome.
So something like that, and you have that cult following that's always going to be there.
Yep.
Again, that's real estate. It's real estate driven though. It's really a real estate play, in my opinion, because it's really location, right? I mean, I think of the examples I just gave. It's all about their location. It's where they're located.
Yeah.
The food and the music and the beer, that all has ebbed and flowed over time, and it's great right now. But if your chef left or you didn't book a show for 6 months, you're alive because of your location.
Yeah. I want to go there and spend money there. I want no part of that business.
Yeah.
There are so many moving parts, from band bookings to your last meal it got to be your best meal.
Right.
And then the intricacies of like actually brewing beer. But I'll be glad to be a patron.
Yeah. Well, I had a taste of the hospitality and the restaurant business on the donut truck, and it was a lot of warning signs flashed in front of my eyes.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I can't kick that itch to try to go, do something like that again.
Yeah. I'd encourage you to go make it big in storage. And when you're 55, like, this is your little passion project.
Yeah.
And it's a break even, and you end up doing well. And I'm actually trying to get the owner of Crying Eagle Brewery on the show. He runs a great brewery in Lake Charles. We bought some real estate from him, and he's just a great guy. So if I can bring him on, we'll talk about, because he's got that, but like on a large scale. Okay. They have great food, great beers there.
Nice.
I know they do some live music. Great culture. I really want to get him on because he's an awesome guy.
Yeah, I would say that if you got into that business model, that's really going to be people dependent. I mean, unbelievably people dependent. You got to make sure your booker is the right booker. Has the inroads. You're getting the bands in there that you want to get in there. Our commissary kitchen for the food truck was next to the heavy metal venue in Atlanta, and these guys had been around for 30, 40 years, and they had the right bookers, right? They had the same bands, and they had been having the same bands for 40 years. But if you hired somebody from outside the group, then all of a sudden you're not the heavy metal guys anymore.
Right.
And so I think that would be something that would be a challenge, but also important. And then again, as the owner, you'd have to turn over a lot to people who are the best at those things, because you can't be the booker, the chef, and the beer maker.
No. There's way too many moving parts for my small and simple brain there.
Yeah.
But I hope you do it.
Yeah, look, I know. I mean, it's something I just always used to like to throw a big party. So to me, it's an entertainment thing.
Yeah.
I'd love to just have the spot that people hung out at.
Yeah. Well, you can absolutely do it. You got the personality for it.
Yeah.
So it'd be fun.
Yeah.
I'll come visit.
Yeah. I mean, I like to do all of those things. I don't know how to make beer, but I like to drink it. I love to cook, and I don't know how to play music, but I like to listen to it.
There you go.
Yeah.
We might have some cold beers and cocktails in our future today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, man. All right, so we're kind of wrapping up the show here. Here's one question I like to ask all the guests, which is, if you could go back and give yourself advice 5 years ago, what would you tell yourself?
I would say listen, and don't really say much for a while when you get out of school. Everybody gets out of college, or maybe you didn't go to college, but you worked a little bit and you're eager to show what you know. And that's great. And it's impressive, and congrats to anybody that can accomplish those things, but you don't know anything at 22. So, know that you don't know anything, and, just absorb as much as you can through osmosis, and, know when to just sit there and observe from people that, even if your ego says, "Oh, I know the answer to this, and I know how to do this better," they've done it. They've probably done it before. So you should at least observe how they do it, even if you might do it differently. That would be it. I mean, it's listen, know when to speak, speak a lot less, and really absorb, pay attention to people who are having success and what they're doing and what they're saying and how they carry themselves and how hard they work. Because especially when you're starting anything, they're probably the first one in and the last one to leave.
Probably.
And I wouldn't let anybody beat me to the office or beat me out of the office when you're starting something.
Yeah. And that's great advice.
Yeah.
That's definitely winning advice.
Yeah.
Well, Gilbert, man, thanks so much for coming on. This was a ton of fun. I know I've learned a lot. We're going to go eat some fresh oysters and go have a good time this afternoon.
All right, man. Sounds great. Thank you.
All right, buddy. I will really appreciate it if you'd leave us a review on Spotify, Apple, or anywhere you're listening or watching to this show. Thanks so much for joining us on this audio adventure. Let's go have some fun.